Avatar: The Last Airbender might be one of the greatest shows ever made, but that doesn't mean it didn't have its mistakes. Avatar: The Last Airbender has been one of the most popular animated shows of all time ever since its release in 2005. While it may only have 3 seasons, the show's gone on to have its own spin-off series, The Legend of Korra, as well as a heavily criticized movie adaptation, as well as providing endless theories and fanfiction. Avatar's inventive storytelling and compelling character arcs are some of the many reasons the show is so popular, and why it sits so high in streaming numbers today, with it returning to #1 on Netflix. But that doesn't mean it's flawless. In this video, we'll look at some of the plot holes and unanswered questions that hamper the show, including the location of relatives, unclear lore, and possible mass murder. So sit back, relax, and grab yourself a calming cup of jasmine tea as we take a trip through Avatar: The Last Airbender, and of course, there will be spoilers. The Air Nomads have always been a peaceful nation who believe in spirituality and harmony. This has been reflected by the character of Aang, who doesn't take war and the possibility of killing lightly.
No, I'm not gonna end it like this.
An example of this is when Aang realizes he'll have to do battle with the crazed tyrant of the Fire Nation, Lord Ozai, voiced by the legendary Mark Hamill. Aang knows that Ozai's evil ambitions to rule the world cannot be easily quelled, and comes to the realization that he may have to kill Ozai if he's to stop him from reaching his ambitions.
I've gotta try.
But Aang, who has constantly saved his enemies in the past, including Ozai's son Zuko, reaches a moral quandary and becomes conflicted over the prospect of becoming a killer. While this morality can be seen as an admirable quality in Aang, fans have been quick to point out the scores of people Aang has killed in action. During intense battle sequences, Aang seems to have no issue wiping out plenty of Fire Nation airships and naval vessels filled with faceless soldiers. Surely there's no way Aang has inflicted this carnage without causing at least one casualty of war. While it's not just an issue with Avatar, with other morally ambiguous characters like Batman also inexplicably killing unknown villains, it does make you wonder why Aang doesn't seem to worry about the many soldiers, but does care about killing the heinous Ozai. Perhaps Aang should take a moment to meditate on this. While we all know about the bending of the major elements, in the final book of Avatar, we were introduced to one of the most powerful forms, energy bending.
I took away your fire bending.
Energy bending is the ability to bend another person's life energy, predating the 4 main bending arts as well as the formation of the 4 nations and even the creation of the Avatar. Before the Avatar existed, it was the mystical lion turtles who bent the energy into themselves and humans. But as humans learned the other forms of bending, energy bending and lion turtles went into near extinction, with the lion turtles being hunted down and killed. The last remaining lion turtles kept the power of energy bending alive, and gave the knowledge to Aang in Book 3, who used it to defeat Lord Ozai and rid him of his powers. But it's still rather unclear what exactly energy bending is, with the creators even stating that the capabilities of energy bending are not well understood. Energy bending is an idea that is shoved in right at the end of Avatar, and feels more like a cheap plot device to keep Ozai alive and to prevent Aang from killing him. While energy bending is used in the spin-off series Legend of Korra, it seems to have different capabilities than it does in Avatar, making the whole idea of energy bending kind of confusing and unclear. Questions around energy bending still continue to appear, but it's unlikely we'll ever have a clear answer. Prince Zuko. Where to begin with this hot-headed teenager? While Zuko begins the show as the primary antagonist, with a Captain Ahab-style obsession to catch the Avatar,
I found the Avatar,
and get his father's love, he is by no means a one-dimensional character. Zuko's journey is one of the most complex and, like Jaime Lannister in Game of Thrones, goes on a fantastic redemption arc, making him one of the most interesting characters in Avatar. But one of the biggest mysteries surrounding Zuko is the location of his mother, Ursa. In a showdown with his father Ozai, the Fire Lord reveals to Zuko that his mother is in fact still alive, with her location unknown. While this seems like a huge plot detail, with Zuko going on a quest to find his mother feeling like an obvious course, fans were left frustrated when it was never addressed within the TV show and left the character of Ursa shrouded in ambiguity. with the fans in a fire of fury and with patience shorter than Zuko. The creators addressed the mystery of Ursa in a comic book named The Promise. While this is all well and good, it still feels like the fans were shortchanged with such a big plot detail going unresolved within the series, unless it was all just to sell comic books. Katara has always had strong ties with her family, and it's one of her most endearing qualities. One of her most precious heirlooms is the betrothal necklace that was passed down through her family and was worn by her mother and grandmother. Sadly though, Zuko steals the necklace in one of the most despicable acts. To help make her feel better, Aang makes her a replacement one, with flowers and her brother Sokka's fishing hook. But while the gesture is appreciated by Katara, it doesn't make up for the real thing, and is completely forgotten about when Aang reclaims the original necklace from Zuko. Poor Aang. Although don't feel too sorry for him, because he does get the girl eventually. Turns out you don't need jewelry to win a girl over, you just need to be a super powerful bender. Another object that goes totally forgotten is Sokka's meteorite sword. Sokka gets the opportunity to craft a sword from a fallen meteorite, and it quickly becomes one of his most precious items. But Sokka, in one of the penultimate moments, has to surrender the sword, with it falling into the Wulong forest and lost forever, leaving us to wonder whatever happened to it. One of the most unique characteristics of the Southern Air Temple is that it's almost impossible to get in if you're not an airbender. The temple, which is the location where Aang grew up and spent the majority of his childhood, is located in the clouds in the mountain range, and is similar in style to the floating Hallelujah mountain range located in Pandora in James Cameron's namesake movie Avatar. The Southern Air Temple is specifically designed for it to be accessible by air nomads, believed to be only accessible by their favorite mode of transport, flying bison. Therefore, in theory, it should be pretty hard to invade, right? But while it's eventually inhabited by the Air Acolytes, a group who purvey and preserve the culture of the Air Nomads, it was left uninhabited during the 100-year war because the Air Nomads were wiped out in an act of horrendous genocide by the Fire Nation. But how did they manage it? While the Fire Nation possesses airships, they do not have access to this technology at the beginning of the war, meaning that they did not have the ability to fly. So if this temple is so tricky and treacherous to reach, how did a nation, at this time incapable of flight, manage to reach the summit? Did they use firebending to get there? Did they have dragons? We don't know, and unfortunately probably never will, leaving it one of the greatest mysteries in Avatar. One of the things you probably know about the world of Avatar: The Last Airbender is that it's split into 4 distinct nations after the 4 elements that can be bent: water, earth, fire, and air, with them even telling us in the title sequence. The world is so fleshed, some fans know the geography of it better than their own country, but while we've been told that there are distinctly only 4 nations, fans have been hotly debating whether this is actually true or not. While there are 4 types of benders, a majority of the nations have separate substates with different societies, cultures, and laws. For instance, there are 2 different Earth states, Omashu and the famous Ba Sing Se. Don't mention that name to Uncle Iroh. Both of which have their own unique qualities and governments. The Fire Nation has one of the most divisive societies. While the fascist nation under Lord Ozai is the most memorable, there are also the reclusive and ancient Sun Warriors, who are separate from Ozai's Fire Nation and live in relative secrecy. The Water Tribe is even more divided, which is split into the Northern, Southern, and Foggy Water Tribe, all of which have their own differences and govern themselves independently. A counter-argument can be made that the term nation is a way of describing a culture or racial characteristics, even if they are geographically convinced, but to some fans, there will always be more than 4. While we're on the subject of separate substates, what if the Avatar was born in one of these remote cultures? As you probably know, the Avatar is a spiritual entity that constantly rebirths after every life cycle, and is the human embodiment of peace and light connected through the Avatar spirit. The Avatar has an innate connection to the spirit world and has memory of the different forms the Avatar takes. The cycle of rebirth is constantly changing, with the rebirth rotating between the 4 nations and giving the Avatar knowledge and power over the elements. The cycle is spread evenly and is supposed to mimic the 4 seasons as well as maintain balance. But what happens if the Avatar is reborn in one of the more isolated nations? Fringe groups such as the Sun Warriors and the Foggy Water Tribe live in relative anonymity, secluded and separate to the rest of the world. If the Avatar was born into one of these tribes, would that make them secluded from the rest of the world too? And could this possibly mean that the Avatar never integrates with mainstream society? While it isn't certain that the Avatar would remain in isolation if they were to be reborn in these societies, it does feel convenient that they were born into more populated societies. Or is that the Avatar way? I can't help but think though that an Avatar born into the Sun Warriors would be pretty damn cool. In a world where people can bend fire, water, earth, and air to their will, you might think that the regular folk might want a bit of help to combat them. While firebenders can breathe fire like a dragon, and a waterbender can break a battleship in half, making traditional weapons irrelevant, not everyone in the world has that gift, and have to make do with your run-of-the-mill, like Sokka for example. Oh, Sokka, always the one to get crapped on.
I'm just the guy in the group who's regular.
While the military use naval craft, airships, and even tanks, general infantry use arrows, swords, spears, and their bare fists.
Sneak attack!
Not exactly that helpful against a guy who can send you flying with a flick of the wrist. While there are regiments of highly skilled elite warriors, such as the Fire Nation's Yuyan archers, you might think that they would want an arsenal of high-powered artillery to level the playing field, but that doesn't seem to be the case. While the technology seems to be available, these weapons are yet to be invented yet, with the more traditional weapons favored. This kind of seems like an oversight by the creative team. Why have these rudimentary firearms not been developed? Well, one answer could be that the creators wanted to keep the tone more in keeping with a traditional anime, playing homage to the Far Eastern culture. A simple answer could be that, at the end of the day, this is a Nickelodeon show aimed at a younger audience, which comes with limitations. Namely, that you can't have the show being too blasty. Because let's face it, we don't want to see a Fire Nation soldier gun down scores of Water Tribe warriors with an AK. While we mentioned before that reincarnation is a big part of the spiritual theme that makes up the show, it always feels somewhat loosely defined. As you probably know, the Avatar and their reincarnation was made possible by the bonding of Wan with the spirit of peace and love, Rava, during the what is now known harmonic convergence. As soon as one avatar's gone, they are immediately replaced with a new one, with the spirit of their predecessor living on within them. But what do they really mean when they say reincarnation? Rava tells Wan, "We will be together for all of your lifetimes," implying that Wan himself is continually being reborn. With the Fire Nation being a fully fledged dictatorship comparable to Nazi Germany or modern-day North Korea, one of the things that keeps them in such a state of authority is their well-oiled propaganda machine. Just like in Stalinist Russia, images of their supreme leader, Lord Ozai, are plastered all across the world, cementing his position of power and giving him an almost supernatural presence. This makes Ozai and the Fire Nation royal family some of the most memorable faces across the world. So, how does his children Zuko and Azula and his brother Uncle Iroh manage to travel, for the most part, with relative anonymity? With their image being in every textbook and building around, and let's be honest, Zuko has a somewhat memorable face, you'd think someone would have noticed a prince and princess just wandering around, and you've got to think that someone would pay a pretty penny for information on the location of the Fire Lord's children. For example, after Zuko and Uncle Iroh take some much-needed R&R after the battle with the Northern Water Tribe, no one at the resort seems to recognize them. What about when Zuko and Azula vacation on Ember Island in Book 3? None of the Fire Nation children recognize members of the royal family standing right in front of them, unless they're just playing it really cool. You do have to worry though about the state of education in the Fire Nation. Despite being a show aimed at a younger audience, Avatar: The Last Airbender never seemed to worry about touching much more darker subjects, such as war, genocide, and the inevitability of death. They did know, though, how to toe the line, never really going into too much darkness, and often keeping the subject as light as possible. Although, there were times that they did cut it close. One of the bleaker moments of the show came when one of the antagonists in the episode The Puppet Master in Book 3, where they introduced the vengeful waterbender Hama, a member of the Southern Water Tribe. Hama was snatched by the Fire Nation and placed into captivity. Hama, however, invented a creative and dark way to escape bloodbending. Using the water in people's bodies, a bloodbender could control their victim's body and muscles, manipulating and bending them to their will, and it's the only art to endanger the user's mental state. As you probably guessed, this makes Hama somewhat unhinged, as the gang discover that she is keeping Fire Nation soldiers captive in underground cells, torturing them at a whim. But how did an elderly woman create such an intricate prison system? Is it possible that she used her bloodbending skills to make the Fire Nation prisoners build the prison themselves in a somewhat sadistic act? I mean, this kind of feels unlikely. Maybe she's just really strong and a great architect. If so, it's a shame she didn't put her skills to better use. Han and Chewie, Frodo and Sam, Shrek and Donkey, Aang and Appa. Every hero needs their trusty sidekick, and Aang is no different, forging a great and endearing on-screen relationship with his flying, butt-kicking bison, Appa. Appa is adored by fans, and with good reasons, but his escape from Ba Sing Se is somewhat fishy. After losing Appa in the desert, Aang and the gang make their way to rescue him, but little do they know that Zuko and Iroh are already in the city. After Zuko learns about Appa being held captive, he decides to pick up his Avatar hunting mission once more. But what happens next feels pretty thin on the ground. In order to find out where Appa is being held, he threatens a random Daily agent who just happens to know the information. Then Zuko and Iroh somehow manage to bust into Appa's jail despite not having any earthbending skills, and somehow let him loose without anyone noticing. It all feels a bit too easy and coincidental in a rare piece of formulaic and lazy storytelling by Avatar standards. I mean, I want Appa free like everyone else, but I don't buy it. The main story and premise of Avatar is centered around the Eclipse. Fire Lord Ozai sought to conquer the other nations and become the supreme ruler of the world, planning to utilize Sozin's Comet to burn down the Earth Kingdom, renouncing the title of Fire Lord and declaring himself the Phoenix King, ruler of the world. In a way to prevent this from happening, the gang planned on using the Day of the Black Sun, which is a reoccurring celestial event during which the sun is entirely blocked out by the moon, aka an eclipse. The eclipse renders all firebenders powerless. As like the waterbenders get their power from the moon, firebenders get their power from the sun, meaning that Ozai would be a sitting duck during the eclipse. Knowing this, the Avatar leads his team to the Fire Palace to take down Ozai. With this in mind, you'd think if you were on Team Avatar that you probably could have helped them. In a tense exchange between father and son, Zuko declares his affiliation with Aang and how Ozai will meet his end at the hands of the Avatar. This would have been the perfect moment for Zuko to lead Aang and company to Ozai, but that doesn't happen. Instead, Zuko confronts him one-on-one and misses out on a perfect moment to overthrow the tyrant. Talk about missed opportunities. As we just mentioned, waterbenders draw extra bending power from solar eclipses as the moon is the governing force behind the ocean's tides. Similarly, firebenders' power increases at the appearance of Sozin's Comet, named after Lord Sozin, who used the meteorite to his advantage and to start the 100-year war, and is the very same one that Ozai plans to use to destroy the Earth Tribe once and for all. This on the surface makes sense, but as any amateur scientist may know, while they may shine bright in the sky like a diamond, they are not the giant balls of fire that they appear to be. Instead, they're a mixture of ice and dust. Ice, as in the solid form of water. Surely then it should be the waterbenders who draw power from the comet as opposed to the firebenders, right? Or as they are technically space rocks made out of dust, it could also give extra power to the earthbenders. Either way, scientifically, it shouldn't be the firebenders who gain power from it, unless it was Sozin's meteor, but that only happens when the meteorites burn up in a planet's atmosphere and turn into a fireball, meaning you wouldn't get much repeat usage. Katara is a firm favorite among the fans, and her rise from a talented prodigy to a powerful waterbender is one of the best arcs in the show. One of her most interesting powers is her ability to use water to heal wounds. This was first seen in Book 1, when during firebending training, Aang gets carried away and accidentally hits Katara with fire, leaving her hands badly burned. Katara flees in tears and heads to the river, where she discovers she can use her waterbending to heal herself and her burns disappear. Now, as you probably know, this was a plot device that will be seen again, with Katara using it several times on Aang, even saving his life and healing his burns. However, one character who wasn't so fortunate to be healed by Katara was Jet. Jet was a radical freedom fighter introduced in Book 1, who the gang are reunited with, but he's captured by the secret police in the city of Ba Sing Se, and during his escape, he's left in a rare dark moment in the show, mortally wounded. Now, while it can be argued that Jet's wounds were too severe, and it's not even fully clear if Jet did die, it does feel like Katara's healing abilities are loosely defined, used to just get the main characters out of trouble and reset the narrative. Either way, it doesn't stop Katara from being one of the coolest benders on the planet. What do you think about these plot holes? Are there any that you think we missed? What's your favorite Avatar moment? Let us know in the comments below and make sure to subscribe to Screen Rant for more great content.